For Fort Monroe National Park. In 1973, I was a young naval officer and I was assigned to a submarine in Charleston, South Carolina. So we moved down into the old historic area of Charleston, South Carolina, which, if you've been there recently, it's hard to believe how it's changed since 1973. In 1973, Charleston was a sleepy old southern port with lots of historic buildings that needed massive capital repairs. And it had a very strong preservation ordinance that went back to the 1930s, which made it more or less impossible to tear down a historic building in the historic district, which is rather extensive in Charleston. And there were developers, and I don't mean to demonize developers, there were developers who were at City Council in 1973 saying we need to get rid of all these restrictions because we can't do things that they're doing in progressive cities like Atlanta, Jacksonville, and Columbia, South Carolina, where they're clearing out all these old junkers and building new buildings that people want. And thankfully, the city did not take their advice, and they stuck to the long-term vision of historic preservation in Charleston. And today, I guess anyone who's been there knows it's a giant economic engine of tourism, maybe one of the greatest in the United States. The same thing happened 100 miles down the road in Savannah. So I have absolutely no doubt that if you adhere to the big vision here and are patient, you will be successful. I can almost visualize all the scaffolding and construction fences around every historic building that isn't yet restored, the hospital building, the trade out complex, the armory, on and on, inside the moat. And I worry a little bit about it when I hear the phrase, we need to be flexible. Mr. Jarvis made that point. I think that every good phrase has its limitations. We should only be flexible to a point, and we need to be patient. And a couple of things in particular, in adhering to the big vision, I think we ought to look at things very, very carefully economically. I was a member of the Leasehold Feasibility Working Group, which voted not to pursue long-term leaseholds, instead pursue sales. And with all due respect to that process, I think we were fed a lot of information, but I think pretty much everyone voted the way they felt when they walked into the process, and we really never talked about it and engaged on it in the way we should. There were some problems with leaseholds, long-term leases identified, such as the realtors are uncomfortable with it, or the local population doesn't have any familiarity with it, or banks may not like to lend as much as on a fee simple, or insurance may be problematic. But I think we really ought to look at what produces the best outcome for Fort Monroe Authority and revenue sustainability. A sale, you sell it, it's gone. You avoid all the costs in the future, but you don't have a revenue stream. A long-term leasehold, if done properly, can produce a revenue stream. And I think we really need to revisit that in a very comprehensive way. Bay Area economics, the first time they were asked to look at it, they were all for leaseholds, and then the second time, when they recognized the wind changed, they were against leaseholds. So let's look at that again. I was also struck by John's comment, John Hutchison's, about $1 a year ground leases. If we're trying to get some activity going that we like here, let's try to incentivize the initial developers with something like that, where they can have a greater confidence of success economically. We're not so interested, I don't think, in producing massive revenue streams initially, as opposed to shifting costs. So we have to give a $1 a year, 50-year lease to somebody to entice him to invest. Maybe that's a great investment, and things will start happening after that. I also appreciated Ms. Bunting's comment about what is revenue sustainability. It doesn't mean the state reduces its outlay here to $0.